Today's lesson is entitled The Dawn of History. It is Chapter 1, Section 2 of Miss Edelyn's World History. Now, we're not going back to the Big Bang. We're starting with human development and evolution all the way up to when man became civilized. The earliest period of human history is known as the Paleolithic Age, so make sure you get the definition of Paleolithic. It means Old Stone Age. And this period dates from about 2 million years ago till about the year 10,000 BC. Okay. Anthropologists also believe that early humans' life began or originated in East Africa. That's where the oldest hominid bones have been found. And one of the anthropologists that made the big discoveries was Mary and Louis Leakey in 1959. Not only did they find pieces of bone embedded in ancient rocks in Tanzania, but they also found footprints, which is really, that showed that these hominids stood upright. And the word hominid that I've used just means a human-like primate. We wouldn't call it a monkey, we wouldn't call it a human, but it was some other branch of the animal tree. Another anthropologist in 1974, Donald Johanson, discovered a hominid skeleton that he later named with his crew Lucy, because the Beatles song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds was playing in the background. He was working in Ethiopia, also in East Africa. The thing that made Lucy so famous is that he found an almost intact skeleton. Lucy's scientific name is Australopithecus afarensis, and you can tell by that very name that Lucy is very distantly related to us. And you may wonder from time to time, how do scientists know the difference between human and ape bones? There are subtle differences in the structure. Let's look at this table of the various hominids leading up to human development. And you can see right here, this is Lucy's branch of the tree, Australopithecus afarensis, and Homo sapiens are way the heck over here. And we're not very closely related, because if you know your scientific terminology, our genus is Homo, and she's Australopithecus, and animals that do not share the same genus are not very closely related. I also made a table of all the other homos besides Homo sapiens, and yes, I am making a joke. And notice that we've got the tool makers, Homo habilis, almost 2 million years ago, Homo erectus, and then Neanderthals, who are very closely related to Homo sapiens. It's not clear what happened to Neanderthals, but sometime around the time when Homo sapiens were on the rise, they went out of existence. And if you've looked at pictures before, you know that the human body during this time is becoming more upright, larger brain, less hair, shortening of arms, and a hip structure that allowed these organisms to stand upright. And again here, this is just more information about humans originating in East Africa and then migrating into Europe and Asia. Much later they would reach the Americas, Australia, and the Pacific. And I have this map that shows, it's a great little map from the internet, the origins of life began here. And then if you follow the lines out, they start out dark and then they lighten up, meaning that humans, slowly but surely made their way, like over to the Americas, etc., and even Australia. So let's talk about the Paleolithic Age. People during the Paleolithic period lived in small hunting-gathering bands and numbered only 20 to 30 people, and everybody was pretty equal and contributed to the feeding of the group. In general, it's believed that men were the hunters and women the gatherers, okay? And the group really depended on this gathered food because it was more consistent. Hunting is a very dangerous thing during this time. It's very hard to bring in a reliable amount of food. Paleolithic people, of course, were nomads. They had to go where the food was, so they followed game animals, and they also followed ripening fruit. There was probably very little conflict between groups because there was so much space, and so the weaker groups were able to move on instead of go into confrontation. So let's review. Paleolithic humans lived in small hunting and gathering groups. They waited for migrating animals each year. They made simple tools, mainly out of the materials of stone, bone, and wood. They did develop a spoken language. They invented clothing, mostly in the form of animal skins. They did use caves and rocky overhangs to live in. They learned how to build fire. Put a star by that one to remember it. This is when fire is going to be a regular tool. And somewhere around 30,000 years ago, people began to also leave evidence of their belief in the spiritual world. And to them, the world was so full of spirits. We call this today animism. Now, this is one of your vocab words. Make sure you get it down, okay? And animism is basically the belief that, again, the world is full of spirits and forces that might reside in animals, objects, and dreams. We have cave paintings that support this belief that we have that they were animistic in their religious rituals, in which hunters sought help from the spirit world to be successful. Also, archaeologists have found small statues that probably had spiritual meaning as well. Here's a cave painting that's very famous. These small statues were usually of pregnant women. That suggested that early people did worship a Mother Earth goddess, because not only were women givers of food because they gathered, but they also brought forth life from their own bodies. And so that was kind of mysterious to early humans. Towards the end of the Paleolithic period, we do know that humans began burying their dead. This is another spiritual development, and this suggested their beginning of belief in a life after death, because they did provide tools and weapons and things that the person would need in their next life. So in summary, the Paleolithic period was a period where early man began to bend the physical world to their will and start to control things around them and repeat things, trying to remember past successes so they could repeat them. Now, the great period of the Neolithic agricultural revolution began about 11,000 years ago. And, of course, we don't know exactly what happened, but probably one of those gathering females figured out that the seed would grow. Now, you want to make sure you get Neolithic age, and Neolithic means new stone. This change is going to take risk. People have to settle down and stay in one place and not follow the food anymore and hope that they really are right about it growing. And so it took a long time, to take that risk, 5 to 10 generations, which would be the equivalent of about 200 to 400 years. The change is so dramatic that historians do refer to it as a revolution. Food-gathering women, as I said, were probably the first to notice that the seeds that had maybe spilled on the ground the year before when they were in their cycle started to grow. The Neolithic Revolution did include domestication of animals. Since you couldn't follow them anymore, they built little holding areas so they could keep some animals like goats and sheep with them. And so they wouldn't have to worry about hunting. Now, they're still going to do some hunting, but they're not going to go following the animals for, long distances. Until the Industrial Revolution of the 1700s, there is no greater change in the way people will live, okay? In settled farming communities, the status of women will begin to decline as men came to dominate the family, economic, and political life. When food was scarce, sometimes warfare would increase, something that they hadn't had to deal with. And remember, everyone was equal before. So some men are going to start to gain prestige as warriors, and this change is going to show that village life was reshaping gender roles. People also began to measure time accurately. We needed to be able to plant and harvest, and so we're going to start to use the first calendars. So, in summary, Neolithic humans learned to farm and were able to produce their own food. That's a biggie. They settled in permanent villages. They domesticated animals. They developed more advanced tools, and they are going to start to use metal. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. And instead of just having animal furs, they began to weave cloth from animal hairs or fibers, like taking the hair from a sheep and making it into yarn, okay? So the metals they began to refine were copper in the beginning because it was soft and easy to access. The Bronze Age begins around the year 7000 to 1500 BC. And bronze was harder, it was more resistant to weathering, although it was kind of difficult to make because you had to mix the copper, lead, and tin. And it was heavier, so it was could be used for better tools and weapons until the king, iron, came along. This was a very hard metal that humans had to learn to purify from the ore. That's why it took so long for them to use it. It was stronger, it kept a hard edge for a lot longer. Okay, and so you're going to be king if you can produce that metal. That's the end of our notes for tonight. I'll see ya.